Happy Friday. My name is Lori Bumbaco. This is Ask the Dietitian, brought to you from the Cancer Wellness Center and yours truly. It's the first Friday of the month, and that means it's time for Ask the Dietitian. We've been doing this now for several years. It's one of my favorite programs. We pick a topic, and then we let our participants ask questions ahead of time, and then I get to set up a PowerPoint and then present my answers to their great questions. So if you are new to Ask the Dietitian, have no fear because we record everything basically. And if you go to the Cancer Wellness Center YouTube channel, subscribe to it, you can check out all the previous Ask the Dietitians because there are some good ones in that catalog. So today, hopefully I do not disappoint and bring to you another great edition of Ask the Dietitian. I'm going to do what I typically do. I'm going to share my screen and go through my PowerPoint, which lists those questions and then my answers. Anyone who registers for this program, just a reminder, you are able to receive all the content that I create. So that's why we encourage, if you're interested, and if you're watching us on Facebook, hi, welcome. We encourage you to register for the program because then you get access to all these great materials. And I spend all this time preparing just for you. So thank you again for being here. And I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully at the end, we'll have some time for those who are on, because we have a good number. We'll have additional time for extra questions. So thank you again for being here. Okay, so this month's Ask the Dietitian topic, I don't know how to say do month. Topic du jour is sugar substitutes. And so we haven't presented on this in a while. So I like when that happens because then it forces me to do my homework and get back to the research and see if there's any updates that I can share. So sugar substitutes, I think they're so popular for good reason. And it's because we have a problem in this country, which gives me job security. It's that 3 in 5 of us are consuming too many added sugars. So with the recommendation continues, we want to consume less than 10% of added sugars. I've done an Ask the Dietitian on that topic, and maybe there will be another one coming, how to reduce added sugars. But this is sort of one of the ways is by using sugar substitutes, potentially. And you're going to learn from me today whether or not that is something that you decide is the best decision for you. But added sugars are, of course, a problem in this country. When 3 in 5 of us are having too many. We're having on average, men a little worse than women. So you have the report card, you're having 19 teaspoons of added sugars per day, whereas women are having about 15 teaspoons of added sugar per day. The limits really are like half of them now. So again, we have some work to do. Sugar substitutes might be an avenue to explore or might not be. And you're going to learn that from me today as we discuss this further. So I'm going to list the questions, give you my answers, share some additional resources along the way. Let's get to those questions. So I thought this was a good place to start. So what are the good and the bad sugar substitutes? That's setting me up, isn't it? What are the healthy sugar substitutes? Is one better than another? I thought these are all great questions to start with. So sugar substitutes, they all they taste sweet, right? Really sweet, actually, and I'm going to share more about that, but they don't contain any sugar. So most of them have 0 calories, that's part of the appeal, right? We get the sweet taste without the calories, but some will contribute just a few calories to our diet. Most artificial sweeteners, which are also called non-nutritive sweeteners, are created from chemicals, and chemicals aren't necessarily a bad thing. As it turns out, the dose is the poison with chemicals, and I'm going to talk about that next or later. But few of our artificial sweeteners, as they're classified, are made from natural substances like herbs, and that doesn't inherently make them better either. We're going to talk about that. They can be very sweet. So some of our artificial sweeteners are up to 700 times, you read that correctly, and you heard that correctly, sweeter than just regular old table sugar. So here's some examples. I like to call it ACE-K. It's much easier on the tongue. Aventame, aspartame, neotame, saccharin, and sucralose. So maybe you've heard of them along the way. Now we have also our sugar alcohols. So like artificial sweeteners, sugar alcohols are created synthetically. So they're typically made from sugars themselves. Sugar alcohols are used in a lot of our processed foods, so they're not necessarily like the sugar packets we see, like on like our sugar substitutes or our artificial sweeteners. Sorry, our sugar alcohols we find in packages in a lot of our diet products. They contribute about half the amount of calories that sugar does. Erythritol is the exception, where it's a 1/20th of the amount of calories. They're not as sweet for that reason, and they add texture and also like mouthfeel to products. So that's why they're used in a lot of our processed foods like chewing gum and even hard candies or chocolates you'll find them in. They can cause some GI upset. So especially in people who are sensitive to them or overconsume them, which some people have claimed to have done and they learn the hard way. So you might experience bloating or gas or diarrhea even from some of these sugar alcohols. Examples of them are erythritol, isomalt, lactolol, maltitol, maltolol, sorry, I mispronounced that, sorbitol and xylitol. The OL is a really strong indicator that it's a sugar alcohol. Get it? So if you're looking at labels and you're reading ingredients, if you look for those things, that's a dead giveaway. That's a sugar alcohol. Okay, and then next we have, just want to move this, I want to make sure I'm giving all the best information, what are called novel sweeteners. So novel sweeteners are derived from natural sources. They're sometimes called plant-derived non-caloric sweeteners. So you can imagine like just off of that language alone, that it has an appeal, right? Like people automatically assume, oh, these must be good for us. They're in the healthy category. They're not, but not so fast. I'm going to talk more about it. So novel sweeteners are not a significant source of calories or sugar to our diet. They don't lead to weight gain or blood sugar spikes. They typically are less processed on the processing spectrum, and they're more similar to their natural sources compared to artificial sweeteners. So you may have heard of these: allulose, monk fruit, stevia, and tagatose. Whew. Where do they come up with these names, by the way? So someone asked the question, what is the healthy choice? And I really have to backtrack there. So how do we define healthy, right? Especially as it relates to a sugar substitute. So to be consistent with the latest nutrition science and even our dietary guidelines put out by the federal government, the updated definition of healthy requires that a food must contain a certain amount of a food group, like fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, foods, or dairy. And it can't contain too much saturated fat, sodium, or added sugars. So, off of that definition alone, I can't classify an artificial sweetener as being healthy, right? So, it's definitely not necessarily, and I know what the person intended, but I think I just want to make this point. In that nutrition is very complicated and complex. And even a term like healthy is sometimes hard to define. But we know from, and what you'll learn from me today is that probably at the end of the day, there's going to be some common sense that we apply that you're going to know. You don't even need me to share it with you, but I'm going to remind you of the boring old advice about what is healthy, what are some healthy foods, what are some healthy beverages. And I'll share that because it's important in the midst of all of the nutrition misinformation that you encounter, you have a trustworthy resource like me. Okay, so one thing is pretty clear. We're probably better off drinking beverages that have sugar substitutes in them than consuming sugary drinks. There is convincing evidence about the negative effects of added sugars, especially when they're in a beverage, and that they result in weight gain, they result in obesity, and they result in chronic disease risk. So, or at least raise the risk for those things, right? So, this is if you're in that category, if you're like, uh-oh, I have a lot of added sugars and I drink a lot of added sugars in my beverages, and I'm at risk for these things, maybe I better reconsider artificial sweeteners and think about implementing them in my diet because I'm having too many added sugars in my beverages. If you're not, if this is not you in this category, I want you to really reconsider them altogether. And I think that's going to become clear in my conversation today with myself and my virtual audience. Okay, so are they healthy and which ones are recommended? So if you do consume diet drinks or artificial sweeteners, look for safer options. And I'm going to stay tuned because I'm going to share that next. According to the experts, replacing added sugars with our low calorie and no calorie sweeteners may reduce calorie intake in the short term and it may aid in weight management. So that piece about our sugary beverages causing weight gain and obesity, we think that this might be a short-term fix, but we don't know about their effectiveness in a long-term weight management strategy. And we also know that there are a lot of other effective ways that you can manage your weight without having to rely on artificial sweeteners. Okay, and that's where working with a dietitian can help. All right, your best bet. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. Your best bet is always going to be, in terms of health reasons, water, whether it's plain or just even unsweetened water. So there's some options out there like just water or hint water or some options that you might want to think about. They add just like a little hint of something like some sort of vegetable or fruit derived juice and they just add a little touch of it. You could do that yourself at home as well. I love the bubbles. So carbonated water is a great option. Tap water that you filter and you dress it up. Like we used to say, we zhuzh it up, right? You dress it up with a slice of fruit or slices of different fruit or cucumber or a sprig of mint or other herbs or a combination of those things. It gets really fun. Or you can even have unsweetened tea and that you ice because you're going to, especially if it's a true tea, like a green or a black or an oolong or a rooibos tea, you're going to insert some extra cancer protective compounds plus hydrate. So that's like a 2-for-1 deal there. Or unsweetened coffee. There are also cancer fighters and antioxidants in coffee. So those are going to be your best options. That's what I would recommend. Since you're putting me on the spot, I have to answer it, and that's what I would recommend. All right, so the next set of questions that you see on the slide, I listed together because I thought they sort of kind of fell along the same lines in terms of what they were asking. And I have them listed here so you can see them. But what is the safest sugar substitute for type 2 diabetes? Is stevia the safest? Erythritol and monk fruit, are they okay? Are sugar substitutes like aspartame that come in iced tea safe in moderations? What is the risk of cancer using a sugar substitute? So I'm going to answer these questions, but not in this order. So I'm going to keep you on your toes as I answer these. So as it turns out about safety, and most of the safety in question comes from cancer. So the dose is the poison, and I alluded to that earlier with the word chemical. So a lot of chemicals, depends on how much of the chemical we are exposed to that becomes the problem, right? So a lot of it's been decades now. I think some of these sweeteners have been around since the late 1800s, but really commercially since like the 50s, 60s. So here they are, and we have a lot of research. And what we know, and this is from the FDA, so you can access it right on their website. What we know is how much of the exposure of these artificial sweeteners matter. So this image is done basically using packets of these products, right? So how many packets would it take in a day for it to be sweet? Or for it to be safe, sorry. So the FDA and also the World Health Organization, in concert, they set acceptable daily intake levels. That's what ADI stands for. That's considered safe if consumed every single day for a lifetime. All right, so it's not just like here and there, because I know I used to drink a lot of these products, but no longer. So now let's put that all into context. So if you did this every day, hopefully after childhood, like for the rest of your life, this is how much you could safely consume. Now, here's an important point to make, which is really going to hopefully convince a lot of people. It has convinced me. ADI, the acceptable daily intake, is based on body weight, okay? And it is set at 100 times less, that the smallest amount might cause a health concern. So they're really giving us this really big old cushion for safety, for the sake of safety. So I don't worry because I know there's a lot of other things that could put myself at risk for cancer and not these, right? And a lot of my experts that I trust are in the same boat. Now, if you feel like you have checked off all the things on your list that help reduce your risk for cancer and you want to also take care of this on your list, put it there. I'm all for that because it wouldn't hurt. It doesn't hurt you to do that, right? But in terms of safety and international consensus has basically found that these products are safe. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some in question, okay? That if, again, you're reconsidering artificial sweeteners, that you might want to take a look at some of these if they're regularly in your diet. Okay, so are they safe? Here's the problem. There's a lot of debate. There's a lot of ongoing debate that has been going on for as long as I've been in practice about the advantages and disadvantages because conclusive evidence-based research to strongly encourage or discourage regular use just isn't there. We don't know. So artificial sweeteners provide promising alternatives to reduce sugar-related health risks, but their long-term safety profile is complex, it's all complicated, and depends on their context of use, okay? So at this point, cautious consumption is advised while balancing any potential benefits with emerging risk, right? So if you feel, okay, the benefit of doing these artificial sweeteners is going to outweigh any potential risk, I'm going to do it, right? Now, you could have an informed conversation with your healthcare provider about that. Okay, I can't answer that in a presentation like this one today, but I think that's a great question to bring to your healthcare provider. Know this, that we don't have any data that they pose harm at the amounts that have been studied, which are huge amounts, right? A lot of the research has been done in animals, and that's where a lot of the debate lies, in that animals have a different metabolism than we do. Animals also have different organs than we do. So if they get a cancer in an organ that we don't even have, or should we be concerned about that? That's what the debate is all about, but I don't really want to get kind of lost in the weeds about that. This is what we know, okay? Now I do want to talk about cyclamate for a minute. This is a picture of it. Have you ever heard of cyclamate? So it is technically currently allowed as a packaged tabletop sweetener in Canada and Europe. It's also in diet soft drinks and in foods in some other countries in the European Union. It was used in the US in the diet and in diet foods until 1970. And it was believed not to cause cancer directly, but to increase the potency of other carcinogens that might be in the environment, because we were all smoking back then, right? Everywhere. We could get exposed to secondhand smoke too. So it was banned because of that. So I'm giving you this slide and offering this information to share with you that there's this misconception that in the States, we allow for these products, whereas around the world, these products are banned, when that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of exceptions where here we have products that are banned because of our regulatory agencies have reviewed the data and have, made some decisions to ban something. So just sharing that for you in case you travel. I would not consume cyclamate. Okay, so are they safe? Now, the short answer, it depends on the sweetener. Okay, now I did give you the evidence. The evidence says that they're safe at the amounts if we consume the amounts that they recommend, below those amounts. Some are safe in moderation, but may cause GI upset. Some you may want to avoid because they may pose a slight risk of cancer. So aspartame is the one that comes to mind for most people. There are concerns that it may also cause some neurological problems. So some people have reported, like dizziness or other neurological issues after consuming it. So that might be just sort of like a sensitivity that person has had. In the research, we have found that men have more enzymes than do women that convert methanol, which is in equal, or aspartame, to formaldehyde. And hopefully you see formaldehyde and you go eek, because formaldehyde is a carcinogen. So it may explain why excess consumption might have been linked to the increased risk for cancer in some men. IARC classified aspartame, that's an international agency. They classified aspartame as a group 2B carcinogen for liver cancer specifically. But they affirmed, and more recently, I think it was just a couple of years ago, that if someone is consuming less than 40 milligrams per kilogram, that is a safe amount. Okay, so this is why it's very important when we look at these carcinogens, we know how much. The dose is the poison, right? So let's put that into context. For someone who weighs 150 pounds, that's 27, 20. How could that happen? 27 milligrams per day. That's the equivalent of 11 12-ounce cans of diet soda. That's a lot. But is it possible? Sure, right? I guess it could be. Now, the Joint Food and Agricultural Organization, in concert with WHO, the Expert Committee on Food Additives, they have shared that we need better studies with longer follow-up and repeated dietary questionnaires in existing cohorts. We need randomized controlled trials that include studies of mechanistic pathways because we still don't know the mechanism, and that's what a lot of people say is the problem. If we don't know the reason why it might cause cancer, then that's a major shortcoming. And what about anything that's related to insulin regulation, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and any carcinogenicity? So we still don't quite know, right? So we think that they're safe, but some people who really feel strongly feel like maybe there is just a question. They have a lingering question in their mind. They want more solid data. They want the stronger data in order to confirm that. Okay. And you might be in that category, and I don't blame you. Okay. So now I'm going to move on to some of this, the specific questions about products and give you a little bit of the dietitian spin on how I feel about it. So stevia it's a really pretty shrub. It's native to Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina. The leaves of the plant have been used for centuries in medicine and also as a sweetener. Stevia comes from a plant, so it sounds all great, right? But it is processed. It's extracted and purified into a powdered form, and it doesn't really mean it's natural, right? It's processed. The extraction process involves steeping the dried leaves of the plant in hot water, just like a tea, and then separating and purifying the sweet-tasting stevia glycosides. All right, so most experts agree that more studies are needed on long-term safety and potential health benefits when it comes to weight gain and diabetes, but it has been shown because it's limited. We think it helps. We think it helps us eat less overall calories, especially if it's used as a substitute. We think it may help manage our weight. We think it doesn't have an effect on our microbiome, but we don't know for sure, right? We only have some studies. So commercial stevia sweeteners that are sold here, they seem to be safe. They're consumer accepted. Like a lot of people I work with like them. Some people pick up on a little off flavor, but it seems to be a good choice. It's been around for a long time, especially internationally. So when with that type of a track record, sometimes in my mind that gives me more confidence that because something has been around for as long as it has been, especially internationally, that probably is a sign that it's okay because we would have known better by now if it was a problem. Okay. Monk fruit. It's derived from a fruit. It's been consumed in China for several hundred years. We really like our sweets, don't we? The monk fruit extract is mixed with erythritol very often to give it a blend. So it gives it like that sugar appearance and even sort of mimics the taste of sugar. It's new to the market, newer. So we don't really know. There haven't been a lot of studies, right? But it did receive the GRAS list or it was on the GRAS list or generally recognized as safe. That happened in 2010. And so it's used again as an additive in a lot of countries internationally. So we think it's probably an acceptable choice. I'm okay with it. Do you need to have a lot of it every day? No. But again, if you're using it intentionally because you're having a lot of added sugars and you're just looking to reduce them, that's fine, right? That might be okay. So in Health Canada, the Food Standards of Australia, New Zealand, FSA, that's the Food Safety Association, I believe, of the UK, and China, they all approve its use based on food safety data. All right, erythritol. It's a sugar alcohol. It's made by fermented glucose with various yeast. Also sounds like really healthy. It's a fermented food, right? Not quite. So it provides bulk and mouthfeel to low sugar beverages. Too much, if you're sensitive to it, can cause some GI upset like nausea. Most adults can safely consume 50 grams per day. So there's, just for reference, there's 4 grams in a 12-ounce can of stevia. So this amount is higher than other sugar alcohols because of the way that it's metabolized. As I shared, it's not as sweet. We don't get as many calories from it. And we tolerate it a little bit better in terms of the GI tract. So resveratrol seems like a good choice. It's mostly absorbed in the bloodstream and then excreted unchanged in the urine, interestingly enough. So I just wanted to share that. There were recent headlines. I don't know if you've been noticing. There was a study about resveratrol consumption and causing blood clots, but that since has been really called under question, and that it was a really poorly designed study, and they think that there were a lot of flaws. They're not necessarily worried about erythritol causing blood clots. And again, I don't have the time to dive too deep into that, but I can share more if you stay on. Okay. Sugar alcohols also, I think, are a fine option. I would just consume them in small amounts. Don't assume also that having something like a diet candy makes it healthier than just regular candy in sensible amounts either, right? Sucralose. Definitely want to spend time on this one. So this is marketed as Splenda. It's an artificial sweetener in terms of its classification. It's synthetically made by reacting sugar with chlorine. Some research has suggested it negatively impacts the gut, and it changes our microbiome and the enzymes in it in terms of helping with digestion. Those with GI concerns or inflammatory bowel disease may want to limit or avoid its use. I typically recommend individuals not consume sucralose. Research, and this was very recent, this was like within the last year, has raised concerns that sucralose may potentially interfere with appetite, may impact insulin sensitivity in a negative way, and then also may negatively affect glucose metabolism. So really interesting what they're finding. But the authors of this research study, in their conclusion, also share that more robust long-term trials are needed. So again, we just don't know. I wish the dietitian had more clear answers for you. All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Which substitutes are best to satisfy a sweet tooth without rebounding you into more sugar cravings? I think that's a great question. So this is also from the FDA, the sweetness intensity of sweeteners compared to table sugar. This is pretty astonishing if you ask me. How can something be 20,000 times sweeter than sugar? I can't even conceive of what that tastes like. But the idea is that probably you need less of it, right? Hopefully. But even 100 to 200 times sweeter than sugar, it's pretty wild to me if you ask me. And I have for as long as I've been in practice, this is where I kind of pause about artificial sweeteners and that what's happening, how does that change our eating experience, our taste perception, our response to foods? Like something must be happening here, right? You just wonder. So do they cause sugar cravings? So sugar substitutes really were created to try to reduce the burden of global obesity because sugars are one of the culprits, right? So they're commonly used. They're very popular for that reason. Not only obesity, but I would also say blood sugar control. Because they're so intensely sweet, in very small amounts, they can help us eat less overall in terms of calories, while still being appealing. So soda is a really good example, like diet sodas. So questions remain if they change the way we taste food. We don't know. Is it possible that that when we eat them, they overstimulate our sugar receptors? Because our sugar receptors were designed to pick up on sugar, not these 2,000 or 20,000 from 100 to 20,000 intensity of regular sugar. What's happening with our receptors? I'm like, what is this? Does that limit our tolerance for a more complex taste? Do they prevent us from associating sweet with calories, right? Because if we're perceiving sweet, but then we're not getting any calories from that food or beverage, how does our body respond to that, right? So a recent study suggested that sucralose, which I also sort of discussed in that last question that I don't really love for my patients, sucralose may change the way our hypothalamus communicates with other regions in the brain. And in this particular study, and this was in people, not in mice, it led to a reported increase in hunger, and the effects were the strongest for those people who have obesity. So good to know. Okay, so again, put this into context. Think about this for yourself. Are you someone who uses sucralose? Have you noticed that? Oh, I do. For the person that asked this question, is it sucralose that you're using? Is it causing you to notice, like, oh, it's not satisfying my sweet. I'm actually looking for more sweet. I want more of that diet product. I think those are really good, important follow-up questions to ask. And then you can decide for yourself what's the answer, right? Again, a dietitian like me can I can always help address that and get to the bottom line, which is we need more studies. So we need to know what are the long-term effects on artificial sweeteners with weight control, with our appetite, and their impact on our perception of sweet. I would say, like I just shared, observe your own unique personal response when you consume these artificial sweeteners. And could you learn to kind of reset your palate to learn to like less sweet, right? So that just enough sugar is enough, right? Because sugar, we're so afraid of sugar in this country. And I think that's not fair, because that fear alone is causing some distress and anxiety, which doesn't benefit us. But we're programmed, we're hardwired to seek out sugar, right? So giving ourselves, allowing ourselves, and experiencing sugar might be a better approach and learning to work with it, right? And if you have fear around it, that's where sometimes counseling is very helpful. Dietitians do work in that area too, in terms of giving some cognitive behavior therapy to work with how your mind is feeling or thinking, or how you're experiencing foods and things like sugar, and how to sort of reset all of that so that it can be more in line with your own health goals. Okay. I think this is the last question. Shouldn't we avoid or limit sugars, even substitutes, from a metabolic standpoint? What a great question. I don't think I have enough time in the day to answer this question. So we sort of already alluded to this. What do we know or not know about artificial sweeteners? How do they impact our appetite? Do they make us crave more sweet? Do they stimulate a response in terms of our insulin levels? Do they release hormones in our stomach that tell us we're satisfied or not? Does it change our gut microbiota? That has a lot of implications. So health effects remain inconclusive. With a lot of the research is mixed, right? So there's like good, bad, neutral. So that's why we don't have a definitive answer. There's a lot of any potential research that's been done. Now, here's the thing. Let me just backtrack. Any research study that has shed artificial sweeteners in a negative light is very likely to get published and very likely to gain a lot of media attention because it's scary. We all probably have some artificial sweeteners in our diet, right? So as soon as we read a headline and it's shocking that all of a sudden these mess with our gut microbiota, that's going to be major clickbait, right? So we want to recognize that. So there is a little bit of publishing bias with some of these research studies, in that if they show some harm or some detriment to consuming them, then they're gonna probably reach our computer or our phone quicker, right? But here's the thing about those studies: a lot of them have flaws. And even one of the biggest flaws is reverse causation. So reverse causation in a research study is when we think there's a cause and effect between two. Like, so diet soda causes sweet cravings. We think the diet soda is the cause and the sweet cravings are the effect, when actually it could be the opposite, right? So the cause and effect is the opposite direction. If a research study doesn't control for that, then there's no way of knowing. Right, and that's where a lot of these artificial sweeteners fall, in that they think it's a bias of reverse causation. So because what happens is it's either a retrospective study where they ask people, who have a health condition, who have already been consuming these products. So maybe it wasn't the product that did it, but the condition did it, and then the products came along. We don't really know. A lot of the studies last only a short time. We know that a lot of the impact in terms of our diet takes decades to manifest in terms of any chronic health condition, right? It takes decades. So here and there, once in a while, we're never going to really know. It's very hard to define in research. There's also a lot of different products on the market. Are you using a packet? Are you having a diet product? What else are you eating or not eating? It gets very complicated. So the research studies aren't where we'd like them to be in order to give you a more definitive answer, unfortunately. And there are, like I shared, there's studies that contradict even the findings of those studies that suggest that they're not beneficial for us. And as I mentioned earlier, we a lot of times don't have a mechanism of action. We'd like a mechanism of action. We want to know the why behind what's happening rather than just because of the type of studies, if they're epidemiological or observational, it's only just seeing what happens if there's a relationship. But when you get down to the nitty gritty of the science and seeing that there's a mechanism that can explain why that relationship exists, that gives us more confidence that that relationship could really be happening. Hopefully I'm explaining that okay. All right, so a little bit of new research that came out. Here I go again. I'm going back and forth, aren't I? So saccharin, in this study, they looked at saccharin, aspartame, sucralose, and ACE-K, and they found that, and this was kind of the headline, these can profoundly impact our gut microbiota and lead to dysbiosis in the microbiome. That's not a good thing. So consequently, when that happens, sometimes it can contribute to glucose intolerance, dyslipidemia, increased triglycerides, and even raising inflammation. And when all of those things happen, it could raise our risk for obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular conditions, and including specifically hypertension. So in summary, the authors of that research study suggested that this is just one study and we need future research. We need to now really and better understand the long-term effects of consuming these products. They specifically called out these. Okay, so just again, highlighting some of the problematic ones that if you notice there's sort of a recurring theme here. In my presentation, there's some that seem to be being called into question from some researchers. So to summarize today's Ask the Dietitian, I would say try to just eat less of whatever sweetener you happen to like. Is it sugar? Is it honey? Is it stevia? Just try to think less. We all can probably benefit from doing that anyway. We eat too much sweet. There's no question. We drink too much sweet. So cutting down in those things will teach our bodies to expect less of it, right? And there's like a gentle reset that starts to happen when we do that. We might start to eat more nutritious food in its place. I love that. The idea of addition rather than subtraction, maybe. So how to do that, again, this is where dietitians have lots of creative ideas, but just replacing is a really great way to start. So thinking of those unsweetened substitutes, especially for your beverages, and just eating less overall, right? So just eating less. If you love to bake, I don't want to take baking away from you, but could you learn to make some substitutes or just use less? You probably can, right? Like applesauce and I don't bake, so you can just shame me for making the wrong ideas, making the wrong suggestions. But I understand you can cut down on sugar and not really affect the quality or the taste. So there's ways to do it. And I encourage you to explore that for yourself because in the end, this is what's going to make a more significant difference for your livelihood. Okay, just sharing some resources. This is from the FDA, a little bit more about artificial sweeteners. Love Harvard, love some of their reviews, and they also have a nice one about artificial sweeteners as well. The American Heart Association, they really are like our forerunners in terms of reducing added sugars in the diet. So if you're looking for ways to do that, and then beyond, I mean, they have an amazing section on nutrition and healthy eating, not just for heart health, but just like overall health. So I really appreciate the work that they do. Okay, so our next Ask the Dietitian. It's on April 10th. It's not the first Friday of the month, but it'll be the second. And it's at the same time at 1 o'clock. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics. That's gut health. So I hope you can join me or at least register and then watch online. I'm going to stop my share. And it looks like we have some questions in the chat. Thanks for staying on. I think I'm just going to go down the line and answer them,
Yeah,
Lisa.
I was going to ask you, Lori, do you want to answer them and I'll keep the recording going since
Oh,
they're in
sure.
the chat? Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so I heard carbonated water is not good for your teeth. Great question. Thank you for asking that one. So it isn't if we brush our teeth around the time. It's all about timing. So try not to, and I'm making a note, try to separate the two. If you brush your teeth around drinking a carbonated beverage, you can ruin the enamel. That's really it. Okay, good question. So just want to separate the two. Next question. I don't eat any refined sugar or use sugar substitutes, but use minimal amounts of maple syrup, honey, or dates. I thought about that one in baked items. Which of these is the most healthy? Is there a better one to use? Great question. So they're all good, because I know I hate using that terminology. Nothing's good or bad, right? But they're all considered, except for dates. They're all the maple sugar or syrup and honey are both added sugars technically. So we don't want to overconsume them. It sounds like if you're using minimal amounts, you're fine. You're even better than fine. Dates, however, are a fruit. So guess what? They get lumped in the good, even better category. They're good for us because they have nutrition, right? So when we think about we want to like step away from uh, reductionistic thinking in terms of food, right? So more than just sugar, what else is in this food? And that's really important to do. So dates have some natural sugars. They're not even added. And that's why they already are superior to anything else that you listed. But also dates are a fruit. So we know they're going to have some fiber, bonus, right? And they also have some great minerals, especially a couple vitamins. And so it rounds out that package. So now you're talking about something that I would define as healthy because there's nutrition in it, okay, besides the natural sugars that occur. So I would encourage dates as much as you can. Maple syrup or honey, I think just use what you like. I don't think it matters if it's raw or organic. If you have seasonal allergies, some local raw honey may help your seasonal allergies. Otherwise, there's really any benefit is sort of exaggerated in terms of marketing. So I would just use what you like because what you like is going to satisfy you. And I think that's the name of the game as it relates to using our sugars. Use them in a way that serves us, that satisfies us, mind and body. Okay. I Okay, next question. Really great questions. Okay. I heard that artificial sugars are like battery acid in your bladder. I don't know if it's that true, but some of our urologists may advise if you have any conditions to limit artificial sweeteners, and I can endorse that. So yes, I would, especially if you notice if you have a bladder related concern that it causes you can do it like a little test of that, which is hard to do because if you're having an artificial sweetener, are you having it in your tea or your coffee? Is that exacerbating a bladder condition or is it in a diet product like a diet soda? So it's hard to tease out what's the actual problem. Excuse me, but I would I would limit artificial sweeteners. Okay. Okay, last question. Sorry, I won't have a sore throat. Okay, so which of these sugar substitutes raises your glucose levels the most? Marion, that's a good question. I don't know the answer because I didn't read the actual studies. I skimmed them. So I'll have to get back to you. If you look at the slides, you'll see the ones that I listed that they were concerned at the very end. The ACE-K, the sucralose. I think I'm most concerned about sucralose with that, but the aspartame, those seem to be the ones that are on the list where they're looking further at in that they're not sure if it raises blood sugars or not or affects our insulin levels, which comes as a big surprise. Okay. But here's the other thing, and this is why it gets so complicated. When we eat, there's a lot of things that influence our blood sugar in a food, right? What else is in the meal? How did we time the meal, right? Like if we had, let's say we're having a salad with a soup with a diet soda for lunch, but we started with the diet soda. that may impact your blood sugars differently than if you ended your meal with the diet soda. So the timing of the meal matters. There's like all of these variables that play into the influence, but also too, like you're having a salad, so you're having some fiber, you're having maybe there's a dressing on it, so there's some fats. So you're having that's going to influence your blood sugar response. So it gets really complicated, but I will give you the specific answer as well in the in the in my materials that I send out. Okay. Um, okay, next question. We're gonna keep going. Thank you, Lisa. I heard or experienced that wearing a continuous glucose monitor will answer that question specifically. It depends on the, yeah, okay, so thank you for who else, I'm not naming names, mentioned that in the chat that, you know, a continuous glucose monitor could, if you're eligible for one, they do cost if you're not. That could help you tease out what is potentially influencing your blood sugar in a way. It's very helpful. I love journaling. Any more data is helpful because sometimes there's a lot of variables to tease out, and sometimes it's more than one thing. So there's that, you know. So if you want to notice if it's one or more things that's influencing you, then that's important to know too. Okay, I thought allulose made from dates does not raise your blood sugar like your glucose like sugar does. Another comment in the chat too, if someone wants to see that. Okay, so hard to manage all this. So yeah, so no, allulose should not raise blood sugar levels. So that one is on the list of okay in terms of blood sugar response. I'll send out the list of the ones that seem to maybe potentially cause a blood sugar response to you all. Okay, great questions. I have such a savvy audience.
I think that should do it, Lori. Thank you so much.
Thank you.